acknowledge that there is always a risk of the virus leaking out of the hotel quarantine system. And considering New South Wales is taking so many travellers compared with every other state, is it time for New South Wales to consider only taking New South Wales residents and not taking residents of another state, for example, Western Australia?
Look, I think that would be a very disappointing outcome because people have different situations. We have New South Wales residents that arrive in Brisbane or arrive in Perth, and I certainly wouldn't want to disadvantage our citizens that are arriving at different ports. Everybody's circumstances are different. For some people who can't afford a particular flight overseas, the only way, they might be a Sydney resident, but the only way they can get back to Australia is via Perth or via Brisbane, and we have to accept that. I think what all of us need to do as state leaders is accept that this is a shared responsibility and all of us have to play our part. And I think the month pause gives us time to do that by halving the rates in New South Wales. Other states have not had those rates reduced to the same extent because they're not carrying as much of the burden. But I'm relieved that for New South Wales we're able to evaluate how we move forward to make sure every state does their fair share, but I don't think we should discriminate between states because we have citizens who, through no fault of their own, who their own personal circumstances might be landing in Melbourne or Brisbane, and we would want them to be treated compassionately, and we should treat other Australian citizens compassionately. Yes, we're all members of a state, but we're also all Australians. Let's not forget that. Australia Day is just around the corner. I'm a proud Australian. I think all of us can be proud of the way in which Australia has navigated this really difficult time. And I think we should always remember that we should be compassionate to all of our citizens. And a lot of the decisions we take on borders, on other issues, I mean, it took us quite a considerable time to close the Victorian border. We knew the hardship it would cause people. And we held our nerve for a significant period of time, but there was a time after which we couldn't anymore when the rates of the disease were so high. And I just wish that others would consider all those impacts because in addition to being members of a state, we are all citizens of Australia, and I think we need to show compassion to one another and appreciate that we'd feel differently if we were in the shoes of other people. And I often put myself in the shoes of other people. When you're making big decisions, you think, what if that was my loved one? Or what if that was my circumstance? How would I react? And that's why that level of compassion has to be central to decisions, and I couldn't care less at the end of the day what criticism is levelled at me. What I want to know we're doing is what is in the best interests of the vast majority of our citizens. You're never going to please everybody, but I feel that we need to make sure that we're always making decisions based on what the vast majority of our citizens need us to do.
You mentioned at the start about the 14-day mandatory isolation period. You seem to be suggesting that maybe the advice is changing or evolving